Okay, let's get started pretty quick here, folks. Thank you. We just got folks running around. All right, we're all good for tech. Looks like we are. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Jack, and we are here for the Aberdeen Flagler Regional District Board of Directors meeting today. So I'll first recognize that we're conducting our business on the territories of the Pechis and the Tashant First Nations, although because we're conducting our business in a hybrid format, we're probably coming to you live from many new channels and Coast Salish territories, and maybe even the Tongan speaking peoples as well. With that, because we're conducting our business in a hybrid format, we do have loads of people online, which you can read. However, sometimes it's difficult to see the folks here today. So we have myself, we have Directors Vida Siga, Director Mike Sparrow, Director Penny Cote, and Director Susan Roth, as well as we have staff members Daniel, Wendy, and Mike in the office right now. And we do have Dr. Minions coming in pretty quick here as well. Okay, with that, we can move into the next item. Actually, no, we can't, because I should say that we don't monitor the chat on Zoom nor on YouTube, because we do broadcast the meeting live on YouTube through Zoom. But because we don't monitor the chats on either of those functions, we use an email address, which is responses@acrd.ac.ca. And at the end of the day, during question period, that's when we ask to see if there are any comments or questions. That doesn't count the gallery who's actually here in person, though. You actually get to ask questions if you manage to stick around that long. Now we'll get to the agenda. So the agenda has a couple of late material items, first of which is for section 8A. We have an item for the Long Beach Air Force lease application. We have Mr. Lawrence Marazzi of Tofino Aerospace. We'd like to speak to the board about that item during that item. So we'll have the staff introduce the item, and then we'll have a vote and then call him up once we get to that point. Also, there is an extra piece of correspondence for the temporary use permit out of Sprout Lake for 9.1C. So that's incorporated in your kits or by email, but it's also available on our website for those of you who want to download it and follow along. That's it for the agenda on our end. Do any directors have anything to add or modify? And if not, we can have a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Director Roth, seconded by Director Minions. Any comments? See none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. That was a good way of voting, Director Johnson. Thank you. Easy to see. Okay, that brings us into item 3, declarations. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest, perceived conflicts of interest? Director Sparrow, go ahead.
I have a conflict of interest with 9.1E.
9.1E. Let me write that down. That's the Mercy Road.
Yes.
And let's hope I remember that. Are there any other conflicts of interest or declarations of gifts exceeding $250 in value? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is adoption of minutes. We have several. Oh, we only have one pair of minutes here. That's the Board of Directors meeting dated April 12th, 2023. Thank you for moving adoption, Director Sparrow, seconded by Director Roth. Any comments, errors, omissions, deletions, otherwise modifications? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. Normally speaking, we have delegations and presentations restricted to 10 minutes. However, if you're getting close to that time, I'll hold up 2 or 1 finger. That's how many minutes you have left or thereabouts. Usually I give you a little bit more. I'll round up based on when we start. But if it doesn't look like you're getting very close to the end of your presentation, I may hit pause and ask the board for just, can we continue to the end of the presentation? We normally don't have to do that. With that in mind, the first delegation is Ms. Nikki Schneider and Mr. Michael Pearson. Operations Manager and Director for Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure regarding introductions and an update on ministry programs. So thank you and welcome. Hopefully we're all set up, and don't forget to use the microphone there. That's how everyone will be able to see you online. Thanks.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having us. I'll just give Nikki a second to get that up and running. Yeah.
Great.
How are you?
Hello, I'm Nikki Schneider. I'm the operations manager for Central Vancouver Island with Vancouver Island District. This is Mike. He's the director for Vancouver Island District. So just wanted to say thank you for having us today, and wanted to go through a quick presentation, introduce you to ourselves, provide some contact for our team, just to kind of give you someone to talk to if you're looking to talk to someone from the ministry, and give you an update on what's coming for this year for our program. So there's Mike and I's contact information if you wanted to talk, take it down. I know Director Sarah, we talked a little bit, so if you were interested in connecting us with anybody. So Service Area 2, which is my area of responsibility, it expands from Mount Sicker Road, which is within the CBRD, up towards Cook Creek Road to the north along Highway 19, and then over on the west coast through Port Alberni and then over to Pula and Tofino. So just a quick map so you know what I'm responsible for. I wanted to provide you with some key contacts over at the ministry. So at the top is our TMCBC line. So any emergencies can be reported directly to them, and they contacted us directly at the district. So there's some stuff there for you, as well as the local area manager, who's Jessica Learn. Some of you might be familiar with her. She takes care of Highway 4, the Pacific Rim Highway, Salmon Beach, Banfield, and Muskegee. And then our bridge area manager is Brad Boyden, and he helps manage and take care of all of the bridge structures in our area. So there's some contacts there for you if you're interested. And then on the other side of the table, we have the Main Road Mid-Island Contracting. So they're our local maintenance contractor responsible for the operation and maintenance over on the highways here. So they do have a 24-hour hotline. So generally, we do recommend for any immediate safety concerns that the public, as well as yourselves, can contact Main Road's 24-hour hotline there, or by email at midisland@mainroad.ca. But for some local contacts, we have Daniel Hutchin. He's the general manager at Main Road Mid-Island. Stefan Yancey, who is their operations manager, and Ian Jari is the local roads area manager. So any local issues can be directed to Ian as well. He is Jessica Learn's counterpart over at Main Road. So just wanted to talk a little bit about our past year's accomplishments. So I'm sure a lot of you have driven through the Kennedy Cove project. So it is, we're just placing the furniture right now. We're waiting for our opening event. So it has been complete. Some lines have gone down, and it cost $53.96 million to complete. So hopefully a bunch of you have had the pleasure of going through the new construction. Some other things that we accomplished last year. So we have the Cathedral Grove interim safety improvements, which included placement of some pickets and rumble strips last year, just to try to increase the safety through McMillan Park while we continue to have conversations about longer term solutions. We also had the Truman Creek culvert installation, which was over on Sportsman Road, which included an open bottom arch and some fish habitat restoration. We also did a couple of deep base repairs on Highway 4 through Sutton Pass and at Doyle Creek, which were pretty extensive and did have a little bit of an impact to traffic, but generally were super successful. And then last year, local staff, we worked with Seychelles First Nation, and we painted the Orange Bridge. We had an event for that, which was really exciting and made some headlines. So hopefully you guys got to see that. So we continue to work with the local First Nation fans, but that's one of the more successful ones that we had last year that made some headlines. Moving forward, so this year we've got a couple of things happening. So in speaking about the Beaver Creek Road roundabout, we completed the functional design last year. And so this year we're looking at some detailed design work and continued stakeholder engagement on the work that's going to be happening there. We're also continuing to work on the concept and engagement for the junction improvements at Highway 4 and the Pacific Rim Highway. And we're also getting the ball rolling on a corridor study for Highway 4 through the Seychelles First Nations community. And I included this slide here for development services. So our development services department takes care of permitting approvals and subdivision applications through the service area 2. So Keisha Disher is our provincial approving officer. So she is the statutory decision maker for subdivisions outside the municipality. So that's her contact info there. And we have a senior development services officer who generally gets and approves all the permits and stuff that comes along. So there's his contact for you as well. And that's it. See, that's fast. So I know we have some time left, so wondering if maybe there's any questions or comments.
If you could stop sharing so it's easier for me to see people online. Oh, there we go. Okay, we do have a speakers list here. So we'll start with Dr. Boyko and then continue on with Dr. McEwen and then Dr. Cote.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm someone that goes over the Sutton Pass once a week, and it's good to see the project very close to completion. It'd be good to see a 30-kilometer-an-hour removal because everyone goes way faster than that anyways. So I'm not sure when that will happen. I think there's some lower signage needed. My question's about the rubble strips of the Grove. Are they going back in the summer or not? Because they're pretty gnarly when you drove over them when they were installed. Thank you.
Yeah, so this year we're going to be replacing the pickets. I'm sure you've seen them. They're looking a little funny. So we will be replacing the pickets before the May long weekend and currently not planning to put the rumble strips down just yet.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McEwen, go ahead.
Thank you. I love the new portion of Highway 4. It's a pleasure to drive back and forth now. I'm in New Clulet. And my question is about the rest area. I see it's blocked off from both directions and just wondering when that's going to be completed as part of that Kennedy Lake construction zone.
Yeah, so it'll remain blocked off until we finish completely construction. So we still have equipment and crews moving around there, so it's going to remain closed for now. I suspect it will be open by sort of the end of May. Is what I tentatively say. Yeah.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, are you going to do any sort of celebration to recognize the completion of that project?
Yes, we're actively talking about that right now. I think it's sort of a project that deserves one. It's half a decade of construction there, so yeah, we're talking about that right now. And once we have some details confirmed, we'll be reaching out to key stakeholders like yourselves to let you know what that looks like.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Mike. So glad to hear that there's still talk about Cathedral Grove. Are we looking at any kind of, I have a number of questions actually. I'll just list them off. Are we looking at parking lot there? It's quite dangerous. I do drive down Island weekly, family obligations, driving by hole in the wall parking. So just wondering where we're at with that. Like to know what's happening with the paving budget going forward. Our roads are in bad repairs through the winter. And I want to invite someone from your agency for a tour like we have done in the past of Sprout Lake to look at safety issues and areas of concern. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Right, I think I'll try to remember all the questions. So Cathedral Grove first, yeah. We've seen, and you mentioned the interim improvements that were done last year with the pickets and rumble strips. I don't think we'll be doing rumble strips again. Those didn't go well. I think they're in the trees within a day or two. But the pickets will go back up to replace the ones that are pretty busted up right now. But that is why we continue to look at a better long-term solution. And what that is right now, we don't know. As you probably recall, we did a bunch of engagement a couple of years ago, and we were working on a few concepts which included a pedestrian overpass as well as increased parking, that sort of thing. But we've been asked to sort of revisit that and consider. So we're continuing to engage with BC Parks, and we will be reaching out again to sort of talk more about that. But I don't really have a great timeline for you right now. And then the second question was a hole in the wall. It's kind of a similar discussion. We recognize that it's excuse me, becoming oh, maybe you want to pick it up. I'm joking.
Yeah. So yeah, as Mike said, Holden Wall is kind of a similar discussion. So we're hoping to have more conversations with the ACRD park staff, and as well as some other agencies, and kind of coordinating what we can do there. We've also been speaking with Emily Osborne's office a little bit about some of the concerns that have been brought up. So again, like continuing to work with the stake, Josie, continuing to work with like just stakeholders to try to figure out what a more permanent solution would be there, and figuring out what would stick rather than looking for just band-aids.
Yeah. Now that I'm not joking, one thing we'd like to actually do is engage with the ACRD staff on that. As you may be also aware, there's opportunities possibly to create parking off side roads through private lands. So that's something that we're certainly interested in as part of a bigger solution. Budget for paving. Great, thank you. So right now our budgets remain sort of consistent. We did some paving on Highway 4 last year, and this year we're really focused on a big section of Highway 19 around the Nanaimo up to Parksville. And so, but we're quite aware of what's going on Highway 4 and out this way. So, you know, I suspect when we get to doing the Beaver Creek roundabout, we'll want to tag on paving projects at the same time. So looking at River Road and possibly parts of Johnson Street. So it's kind of the same. We're just trying to prioritize which areas to do first. This year we're kind of we're giving everyone a bit of a break on Highway 4. We just reopened it. There's no scheduled closures anymore, so take the year off here, but we'll certainly be back soon.
Director Minions.
Thank you very much. Wanted to thank you for your work at the city on the Beaver Creek project. I know it's been ongoing for a while, and the regional district as a stakeholder, but from the city's perspective, we've really appreciated the province working with us on that, as it has been a huge area of concern, and we're hoping for that capital work obviously to be funded as soon as possible, knowing that we're getting closer and closer to those final plans. I did just want to speak briefly to the rumble strips, and I know it's probably, I can't imagine how much negative feedback you guys probably got over those, and at the end of the day, people do not like to change their patterns, and from my perspective, what I saw was a really effective and easy way to get people to slow down through that corridor. So while it was certainly controversial, and you know, I saw all the spray paint on signs and everything else, people did not like them. But man, did they ever drive slower through that area. And it almost makes you think there's not necessarily the significance of improvements possibly needed to that area if we can just control traffic and get people to slow down, watch for pedestrians, and be respectful of people parking and everything through there. So understanding that that's it's a challenging thing when you do receive so much pushback, but just wanted to share that I actually thought, and I heard from a lot of people, that they were a really effective way just to improve safety for slowing people down. So all up to you moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I had a couple myself, but we'll let Director Seeger go first. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, like you're working on Taylor Bullet Junction and redesigning that, and you know about the bike path that's going to be extended through there. So you're working collaboratively?
Yeah, so our office did receive the plan for the connection for the multi-use path from the ACRD. Yes, so we have been reviewing that and speaking with the local staff there to coordinate what we're doing there. So we're continuing to kind of talk about that. I know that work is starting to happen at the multi-use path. So we're working on our end for the junction to have a concept design. We're really looking at tightening up that right turn from Euclid onto Highway 4 so that it's a little bit easier to understand where someone is going, and redoing the islands there just to kind of give it a facelift. So we are continuing to communicate with the ACRD to make sure that we have something in place and we're connecting the two projects as needed.
Thank you very much. That's really good to know. the other piece of that is it possible to have a walkway across from the business area to the path? Because I can see that there's going to be problems in the future.
Yeah, so that one is still a point of discussion between our agencies with the kind of configuration and the sightlines there. The placement of a crosswalk just needs a lot of thought. So we're still talking about that because we do recognize that that may be an issue. I can get back to you when we eventually have more of those conversations if you're interested.
Through the chair, thank you very much. Yes, and if the crosswalk can be away from where the dump trucks come out, then
Yeah.
I'm interested. Thank you.
Thank you. I had two comments myself. So having a conversation or looking at the map, I know it's not in our area, but I do travel to the IU fairly regularly. And the sinkhole problem that was happening just north of Lanceville or just in Lanceville, that was tackled really fast, and I appreciate that. My concern is that kind of event. Is that something that you've looked at for the entire area? Because it feels as though that is something, maybe this is a bridge issue more than anything else. Has there been any studies or surveys done, even just quick stuff, in regards to risk management of that happening somewhere else, especially in our area?
So we're aware, we've done some work on this. It is a bit hard to predict where the next failure will be. You know, certainly we're looking at all of our structures and culverts annually and trying our best to prioritize which ones to do first. So it's a hard one to guess. The Lanceville sinkhole is a great example of the culvert was acting fine, its water was still passing. However, you couldn't see that in the middle there was issues until it failed. So yes, we do some work to make sure that we're staying ahead of it, but it's certainly a challenging task to do.
So secondarily, I think is to build on something that Dr. Minions was talking about. I do appreciate traffic calming measures in Cathedral Grove. However, I know that there's a balancing act between traffic calming and what's going on with trucking for the most part. I think that's the main consideration there. Has there been consideration given to kind of other types of traffic calming measures? I know that I can't remember what you called them, but the plastic fence pole things.
The building needs
Yeah. Are there other things that you could do to help create kind of a slower traffic slowdown there? Because I think it will be necessary as the tourist season comes on. Definitely not the rumble strips, but you know, when things are narrower, generally people are a little more, even with those things up, people do drive slower as a result of that. Kind of reminds them of the speed they're going at. I guess this is more of an engagement session kind of conversation though, so maybe I'll wait for that. Thanks.
Well, you do raise a good point because there's certainly ideas out there that we can implement in terms of getting people to be aware of the fact that there's a lot of pedestrian activity there, but there's always trade-offs, and some of those trade-offs may be limiting the amount of parking along the highway or other things that would actually affect the number of visitors to the park. So that's where we need to do a bit of engagement on what that could look like.
You're going exactly where I wanted you to. Thank you. You probably read my mind. Okay, are there any further comments? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. What about cameras? Are you working with the RCMP at all on speed limit there? Thanks.
Well, in terms of speed limit, I mean, we rely on RCMP to enforce the speed limit. And generally we found, especially with the tickets and all the strips, there's been better compliance. Cameras, I don't think we've looked at that. Yeah, we don't have power up there. The flashers lights that you see, those are all solar powered batteries. And so now cameras is not something we consider just yet.
I think those would end up in the forest myself. Thank you. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. And if you can leave behind the PowerPoint, we'd like to probably translate that into an email and send them out for the if possible. Great. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the next item on petitions and delegations. This is a requesting Looks like water protection on behalf of Weiner Creek. Mr. Snowden, I think you're up next. Okay, just make sure to use the talking button and then we're all good. Thank you. You have to make sure to use the, yeah, there you go. You want to use the button.
Okay, I'm Brian Soden. I'm from 10745 Lakeshore Road. And I thank you, directors and staff, for allowing me to present today. I'm going to be covering just a little bit about what we have observed over the years. I've been a resident here of Sproat Lake for 36 years and live on near Sproat Lake Landing. From my research, it appears there to be little information that has been collected regarding our area. So the ACRD and directors need to rely on people like myself noting our observations and responding to concerns and protect the area so it continues to remain pristine. I believe the Sproat Lake Official Community Plan provides consistency and structure and addresses community vision, agriculture, environmental conservation, employment, tourism, heritage, and residential living in preparation for growth of Sproat Lake community. It acknowledges the uniqueness and fragility of the Weiner Bay area and balances the commercial need and residential area. And for the very reasons that have been brought forth in the OCP and by the lake residents, this balance needs to remain as it is. We need to protect the two riparian areas in our community watershed and the quality, flow, and supply of our water for today and tomorrow's use. This is Weiner Creek as it enters into the Weiner Bay estuary. Do not compromise the ecological integrity of this environmentally sensitive area. We need to preserve our fish stocks, wildlife, water, fowl habitat, especially species that are at risk. It was recognized in the OCP that together the water feature and the riparian area form aquatic ecosystems which are critical for the survival of fish and fish supportive processes which are important to maintain biodiversity and essential for many species. Unnecessarily disturbing these sensitive and important aquatic environments may harm the vitality and the ecological services they provide and can have downstream consequences on fish habitat. When we first arrived here, the lily pads had flowers and were larger like the ones you find at Boston Park. And was sparse. We would access our beach, paddle boat throughout Weiner Bay, access the shorelines, Sproat Lake Landing, Fire Hall, and into Weiner Creek through the tunnels or the culverts to the other side of the highway, but this is not possible any longer. Our boys played in the shallow waters on our beach, learning to swim, enjoying the beach area, but this is no longer possible as the lily pads have been taken over. They now have to access the water only from the dock as the lily pads have expanded. So we no longer have a beach to swim from, and they have crept about midway along our dock from the bay. And you can see here, this is our dock. This is Sproat Lake Landing dock. This is Weiner Creek as it comes into the estuary. The water flows into this bay, and the fish spawning creek comes through here, and then beside our house. You can see the effluent from Sproat Lake Landing's sewage site here drains into the ditch and into both creeks and the nutrients have spawned tremendous lily pad and algae growth. And it doesn't go past here or here, so it's just affected this area right now. These lily pads are so thick that we can't get through there with our paddle boat. It's extremely hard to get through with canoe or kayak. And our boys used to swim off the paddle boat into Weiner Creek, but they can no longer do that. Our son, who is now 33, says it's not safe in the summer when the water temperature warms up. Put your head underwater in these areas as the water is polluted and the weeds have taken over. We have significant spread of these smaller, dense lily pads, and it's become far more difficult to navigate these areas. So the children who visit, our future grandchildren, will have to access the water from our dock only. They can't swim along the shore, but have to swim out into the deep water, which is where the boats and stuff travel, so it's not as safe. This needs to change to stop the nutrients going into the lake and the weed growth in the lily pads will lessen. This is Sproat Lake Landing. In past years, the dock at Sproat Lake Landing was much shorter and did not intrude on the neighbors' accesses. The current dock for Sproat Lake Landing extends out beyond and in front of 3 neighbors' docks, assuming the reason for this was added length was to increase their docking. So you can see here, the dock used to stop here, these pilings. It's been doubled in length out here past the neighborhood docks. This is beaver trails. This is where Weiner Creek comes through the thing. And about the second dragon boat in the summer, that's dry. So you're sitting on the thing. These light areas you see in here, this is all silt that's been spun up by the boats coming into the dock. It makes the water swirl into the bay here, becomes so turbid and dark from the silt being stirred up that neighbors describe the water as a brown soup in the summer. They also have difficult navigating in this area here due to swimmers off the dock, the garbage and the people urinating off the Sproat Lake dock, etc. People here lost their privacy to swim in clear, clean water. If there's any new commercial zoning in this location in the Weiner Bay Estuary, vessel traffic would dramatically increase, which will cause significant more sediment disturbance, which is known to contribute to decreased dissolved oxygen in the water. It will most likely occur in conjunction with the warm waters of the summer that already lead to decreased dissolved oxygen. These compounding effects will be detrimental to aquatic animals in these waters. The increased turbidity also clogs up the filters and water pumps from the local residents. Changing filters depends on turbidity. Sometimes you can do it every week. Pumps are expensive to repair, especially if replacement is needed. And unfortunately, the water is unusable for drinking, brushing your teeth, cooking, etc., unless it is filtered when it's so turbid. Therefore, the ecological integrity of the Weiner Bay Estuary and creeks are environmental sensitive areas and need to be protected. We need less turbidity, less pollution going on in the lake in this fragile area. Both Weiner Creek and the fish spawning creek and the estuary have had significant declines in aquatic population due to the anthropogenic habitat degradation and existing commercial development. When possible, every precaution must be taken to protect Weiner Creek Bay and the estuary in both creeks, allowing the aquatic habitat a chance to recover. Over the years, the increase in algae blooms, increase in lily pad growth, and silt disturbance has caused major decreases in small fish, frogs, leeches, and many other water creatures. This in turn has forced predators such as herons, bald eagles, otters, weasels, and others to move over to other areas. Even the ducks and geese avoid the large lily pad forest. The OCP states that it's important to maintain and upgrade where necessary septic system to provincial health standards. What has been a huge concern in my neighborhood is the sewage problem that continues to plague Sproat Lake Landing, formerly the West Bay. There are always lots of excuses for the system failures and also claims that they have the state-of-the-art septic system, but it still fails, which affects us directly. This is on Lakeshore Road. This is the Sproat Lake Landing septic tank and fields. The sewage comes out of this hillside, seeps out, And whenever they're busy, runs down in here to Fish Swine Creek or goes that way directly into Weiner Creek, which goes directly into the lake. And you've seen how it affects the growth of algae and lily pads. Thank you. This shows the Weiner Creek Bay, or Weiner Creek, and this is the trees along the bedrock outcrop. And it's about 15 meters from the creek up the thing. And you can see this is just moss that grows on top of the rock. There's no soil. This is broom that eked out the thing. There's not enough soil on that bedrock outcrop to grow trees. So that's why we have trouble with these septic systems. We can't go. And this is looking from Highway 4. You see the Weiner Creek here over here. This is the pond and the creek that goes out past our place, and that's looking from Highway 4. Besides the annoying odor we get when we walk along Lakeshore and see the seepage of the sewer that runs into the creeks, we have a lot of problems with that, and we're at risk for diseases when we swim. And the little ones, they tend to drink some of the water and stuff, so we have to worry for health issues and contracting various infections. So the deleterious environmental impacts have historically been dismissed as out of sight, out of mind in favor of shiny allure of economic gain. When we learn about all that glitters is not gold, any proposed economic advantage founded in environmental harm is wrong. Putting our health at risk, jeopardizing our water quality and our future cannot be traded for economic gain by a few. The alignment in support of development is in itself not a bad thing for the valley, but development must be done with care, matching the land and environment and development. This proposal came to us was seriously flawed. We did not align with the OCP, and the community and environment density was more than the area could sustain. Development for development's sake needs to stop. You have heard the community say loud and clear that the OCP must remain intact, and the zoning for tourist commercial is not going to be endorsed by the community. Please do not bring another proposal to us that does not align with the OCP or has tourist commercial zoning requirements. The community has rights that need to be respected, and we trust that the ACRD will do that in the future. And just in conclusion here, this is July last year. So reliance on provincial bodies governing policing the effects of this can't be done. We don't believe it has been done. So reliance on the other governing bodies regulate the water quality, sewage, fragile ecological areas, safety, garbage, invasive species and stuff, traffic loss, lifestyle increases in density. It just doesn't happen. We have to protect it. I encourage you to listen to each other, the director of our area, and vote with them, not against them. Vote for land use that does not compromise the ecological integrity and impact the residential rural area and character of the OCP area. Environmental implications to the watershed, creeks, and estuary requires a clear priority to your decision process rather than a successful development application providing economic benefits to a few and the loss of our pristine lake. This is the family just enjoying it from mothers, grandmothers, and kids. This is what we want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you'll need to stop sharing the screen just so I can see if there's anybody who has comments. We'll start off with Director Koze. Please go ahead.
Through the chair, thank you for coming forward with this presentation. I think that it's very clear about the environmental issues that surround this particular piece of property. The OCP had identified this as a problem area many years ago. That's why it was residential zoning rather than commercial. Living past this area, I witnessed the smell and odor. On the other side of the landing is the fire hall #1. And my husband is a volunteer fire department member there. And he's alerted me that there's no one drinking that water, no one washing with that water. It's filtered and there's UV light, and yet the odor still exists when they wash the trucks. Very concerning about what has happened in this little bay over the many years. And like you've identified, you know, people just don't talk about it, haven't talked about it, and it should have been an issue that was brought up years ago. I have, right from the word go, listened to my community talking about water quality being number one issue, no matter what part of the lake. I do water testing. I did a water test with the support of the community association just a few 4 weeks ago. Providing that service has identified there's certain areas around Throat Lake that have total coliform and E. coli issues. And in the past, this has been an area of concern. Continue to want to do water testing, and will do. Once again, going back to the Minister of Environment, we had algae bloom a couple, 6 years ago, something like that, where there was a metallic taste and people couldn't drink the water. It would smell coming out of their tap. So water quality is absolutely number one for people to be able to exist with the services that we provide our own water. We're our own water purveyors. And I wanted to say thank you for bringing up this issue about the water quality in this area. And it very much does reflect on the application that was submitted by Sprout Lake Landing. Love to support tourism and economic development, but this is just the wrong location. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Dr. Minions and then Director Sparrow.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation today. And I want to, I think for me personally, separate comments around a specific development application with and or future development with what sounds like a specific property issue. So I guess some of us are probably informed on this and some of us are not, but I'm curious if there's a history of staff reports on septic concerns and actual testing in that area, follow up other ministries or not. And if there is, then I think it would be relevant for that to be brought to the whole board. Given that we are not the regulator on a lot of these things, and I guess I'm curious when we receive these complaints, which sound like very valid and concerning complaints, and at the same time are completely outside of the scope of knowledge of most people on this board. What course of action would the regional district typically take? And I guess maybe just a brief overview of what has been done in the past, and if there is again, outside of, future zoning or applications or whatever else, is there a recommendation on how we could proceed based on these complaints today?
From the CAO.
So you're correct. We don't manage or oversee septic specifically. When we do receive a complaint, that complaint is then forwarded to the appropriate authority, which is Island Health Authority, and they oversee those elements. We have last summer, I think was the last time we received a complaint regarding this specific property. That was forwarded to Island Health. They did investigate, and I think there were corrections that had to be implemented. They oversee that work to ensure that it is completed. For us, all we do is we flow through the complaint, or we encourage residents with the complaint to share that information directly with the province, because that is the appropriate authority. If there is an application that comes in tied to the property, there again, we work with the province, they're the approving agency to make sure that the standards are being met, and our approval is always conditional on those provincial approvals being received. I don't think I missed anything on that, but good, I didn't. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, next up I have Dr. Sparrow.
So my question is pretty well what you just answered in that fact with Island Health. Have you given this presentation to Island Health about the whole Weiner Bay and the whole problem you're having with this growth so they can look at it and see where it's coming from?
Yes, so we did talk with Island Health regarding this last specific incident where they were pumping up the sewage tank into the bushes and that poured directly into the Weiner Creek. She was not aware, the owner said that he was an engineer in the sewage system business, and he said it was proper to do that in a certain situation. He said he contacted Island Health and it was okay with her. I spoke to Lenny Rose, who's with Island Health, and she said that he had not spoken to her about it, and what he did was wrong, and she would be talking with him, dealing with it. So yeah, it was brought up, and we did speak with her, and that's all I can say about that.
Thank you. I have Directors Cote and then Roth.
Thank you. Through the chair, to the board. So over the years, we've had community fairs where we talked about water quality and sewage issues. And I believe there still is. Brought in, there's water bottle testing bottles here in the office that people can pick up at any time and deliver to the lab in Courtney on their own, or the community association does a group testing that I arrange. Also, I did get in septic testing kits that people could pick up here at the office as well. And this is over the last 18 years that we've been working on these issues, trying to remedy any old septic fields. You would have to do the testing yourself from your own home, your own system. So you couldn't test your neighbors, even though you thought it might be your neighbor, which was an issue. And I have, over the many years, talked with Ministry of Environment regarding water quality issues, septics. 5 years ago, we started doing water testing with the support of the Ministry of Environment. We have volunteers. We go out to a couple of identified areas and do water sampling and bring those tests in. They're in the middle of the lake, deep. There's different issues with different types of algae growth. The one 5 years ago was a deep lake algae growth. Not sure where it came from. Apparently there was other areas that also had it. There's been this bloom of these new small lily pad growth and in specific areas. And right off of Weiner Creek is one of those areas. And I think that it's promoted by the pollution that's going into the lake that feeds into the growth of these invasive species. So just wanted to also provide that information that Sprout Lake community with myself are actually doing a lot of monitoring on the water, working with Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Health as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Director Roth and Director Minions, and then I have a final comment.
I'm just curious to know if when it rains and rains heavy, is there turbidity problems? And also when you're talking, or maybe it was someone else was speaking about when you're taking water tests, are you doing it on raw water or treated water? Because when I do tests of my own water, raw water, it's always contaminated. It always has coliforms. It always has E. coli. But when it's treated, that's what makes the difference. I'm just curious. And the turbidity usually is more difficult in our area when it rains.
So the testing is on wells, the testing is on raw water and filtered water. Some people will do both. So they'll do a test right out of the lake. I also go down to the end of Taylor Arm. There's a natural aquifer a pipe that comes out, and I just want to say that that water's clean.
Thank you. Director Muniz?
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest that at minimum, we refer back to Island Health on this to follow up on the complaints that we've received or concerns we've received. And it seems like from the pictures that there is an evolving problem here with the lily pads in that area. And again, I think we can kind of speculate on what it might be coming from, but this is not our area of expertise. So it seems like at minimum, we should be referring this to the to the Ministry of Environment for follow-up to see if there is, if they do deem that there is something to further follow up on, either with the property owner or with the ACRD in generally that area. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point, and that's my final point, is that issues of health and safety and environment are not the jurisdiction of the regional district. As much as you want to tell us what's going on, we can't incorporate that into how we make our decisions, because we rely on the province to give us the yes or the no. And when they give us the yes or the no, that overrides whatever local knowledge may exist, because we don't know the methodologies and so forth. That can be verified, and we need to specifically on these kind of issues interface with the province and with Island Health to make sure that these things are considered and updated in the future, because we don't consider it when we talk about temporary use permits, rezoning, OCP, that sort of thing. We rely on the province to go, yes, it's good, or no, it doesn't look good, so no. And that's literally the process. And that's it. We've had a long discussion now. I don't think I'm going to have any further comment as a result of that. But what we can do is make sure that we do have follow-up help to make sure that these things are referred to the regulatory agencies involved and go from there. Director Cote, can you ask your question to Director or Mr. Erg? And this will be the final comment, please.
Sorry, I just asked Mr. Erg, then isn't that why we have an OCP, so that the community has a voice?
On the issues that are defined in the OCP, not environmental, not water, not health. Those things aren't considered in OCPs. The process is pretty straightforward, but it's not always well understood by residents. Mr. Erg, is that reasonable?
I was just going to add that there are development permit areas, and they've just recently been expanded within the Spur Lake official community plan that deal with riparian area protection. And so that would cover the areas around Wine Creek as well as the areas out into over the water, like there's docks, etc. But certainly issues around septic and issues around invasive species and some of the turbidity in the water, those are all outside the jurisdiction of the ACRD.
Okay, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. Let's make sure that there's a follow-up to get this information to Island Health and whatever agencies may be necessary to get this incorporated into their process as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so that brings us to the next item is correspondence for information. So item 7, there are 2 items for information, one from the Island Coastal Economic Trust and one from the UBCM, that Fire Smart item. Would anyone like to pull anything out? If not, we can have a motion to receive. Thank you, Director Rod. Do we have a seconder to receive the information? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to request for decisions and bylaws. Item 8A is the Long Beach Airport home lease application. So I believe this is the one that we should have a motion to allow, I forget your name, I'm sorry, the fellow from aerospace to speak, Mr. Marazzi. Could I have a motion to that effect, please? Thank you, Director Minion, second by Director Sparrow. All those in favor? All opposed? A motion carried. Thank you. So we'll have if you want to come up front and just be ready, but we'll have staff introduce this first. Please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by speaking a little bit to this. So essentially, We are bringing forward resolutions to the board to consider for entering into 2 different long-term lease agreements at the Long Beach Airport. We've been working on development of long-term leases for a number of years now, and we first took this to the West Coast Committee in October, which we now have had a board changeover. So there's a few new board members, and I believe we might have some questions. Happy to answer them. There's a lot of components that have gone into consideration and aspects of this. So I will do my best to give an overview, and then I will pass it over to Lawrence to speak specifically to his lease application as well. So actually I wanted to do a share screen just to give a context for the area. Let's see if that's showing up. Excellent. So this, I think, just helps us all to give context on where we're at here. If you can see my hand, I think I can. We've got our runways for the airport, 3 main runways, and then we have our taxiway over here, and this is the airport terminal building. So as you drive in on the main road, and then we've got road access over here to our terminal, and then some areas. And I want to maybe zoom in a little bit to give a little better context again. So as the roadway comes in, these hatched areas are some areas that we currently have leases. These are either monthly ongoing leases or short-term 3-year leases. This over here is our terminal building. So you're probably familiar when you come into the parking lot area here. And we have some hangars that are on airside existing right here. And then this is Lysander Lane. So what we're talking about right now is looking at these areas over here in the yellow, adjacent to Apron 2. There's a gully that separates the current hangar development and airside development from our future development area that we're looking to extend to. These 2 lease lot applications. So we originally had Dennis approach the ACRD in early, I think, 2021, and he is basically looking to develop a private hangar to store his personal aircraft. It's getting damaged when it is just stored on the runway and the taxi areas. And we really just don't have a lot of lease lot area available. And there's an old fighter hangar pad that exists in this gully area over here. And so this would be a prime area for that. However, there's no road access. And so in order to develop this lease lot area, we would need to extend roadway from where we are existing over here around the gully and to this area. Dennis is willing and able to basically fund upfront the cost of that construction in exchange for rent credits. And that was the original discussion that we had on this item. Shortly thereafter, we had Tofino Aerospace, Lawrence, who will be doing his presentation, who also approached staff and was looking for airside lease lots for his startup business, which is looking at unmanned aerial vehicles, and he can talk more about the details for that. But just to give you context here, we are looking at this area, which is, this is a apron access for these lots here, as well as we have a septic system that exists here. So we have a lot here, and then across the road looking at these areas. And these are the ones in question. So we have this long-term lease for Dennis Palernos, and then these 3 lots for Tofino Aerospace. And I'm just gonna exit. There we go. So what we've been working on with these applicants is a discussion on how can we make this work for the ACRD and for development. In previous applicants that we've had come forward, we've talked about some of the challenges with short-term leases. So it's very difficult for any development to happen at the airport if there isn't security and assurance that you are going to be able to invest in the airport, get a mortgage or funding in order to spend $500,000 on building a hangar or other office buildings or infrastructure. And so in order to allow for any kind of development that isn't just temporary CCANs or storage on site, we are going to have to be looking at long-term leases. And we especially want to be promoting and supporting airside development. We are going to be starting up the Long Beach land use development and the long-term land use and development plan starting this summer. And until we have that, we've been very hesitant to move forward with any applications for long-term leasing for anything that isn't air related, because we want to make sure that any of that is going to align with the vision of the community. However, we know for certain that the land use plan for the airport must include air activities. So any development that is airside, that is air related, will align with our future land use plan. So these two applications are ones that we said, okay, we do not need to wait for the land use management plan to be in place in order to proceed. Both of these applicants are looking to move forward on these. And if we aren't looking at this and investigating it, they will be moving to Campbell River or Qualicum and looking at other opportunities for places for, especially as far as business goes with air-related activities. So we've been looking at this, we've been working with our lawyer and working out the logistics. And essentially, we have determined that the general cost estimation that we're at for extending the civil infrastructure, so that'll be road and water extension of our existing system, is looking at about $580,000 to build that infrastructure. That infrastructure will become the property of the ACRD as soon as it is constructed. It will actually be 1 year after it's been constructed because we want to wait until the maintenance period and then we accept it. That is an excellent asset for us because it services these lease lots, but it actually opens up another 11 to 14 properties for development. The benefit to the ACRD is really the lease revenues. So the Long Beach Airport is currently operation costs are just under $1 million, like $900,000. And the majority of that has to be tax funded. We do receive money from our flights, scheduled flights for passenger fees. We also receive revenue for, landing fees. All of that is, I think, our landing fees. I just made some notes on this because I was like, oh, it's quite low. So we make only about $75,000 from passenger and aircraft parking fees. Fuel concessions is under $10,000. And the remainder, like for 2023, it was $600,000 for tax requisition. This is really high because it costs a lot to operate an airport. We have a lot of infrastructure from our World War II airport that we have inherited that we have to take care of, but inherently just to meet the safety requirements to operate the airport, it's expensive. The airports that do well are ones that have developed their lands because that land and property lease revenue can offset the cost of taxation. So we know that if we want to reduce the burden on the public to pay for taxes, that we need to develop the lands. So that's sort of where we've been moving in the direction over the last few years to try to work towards. Some of the challenges that we've been working on have been contamination. So we have Dennis's lease application is looking to be unregistered. So we know that the area, that existing hangar, it is a contaminated site. It's been identified as such. But if we're not registering it, he's still getting a long-term lease. But because he's not seeking external funding, he is satisfied with an unregistered lease. So he still knows that he is going to have that lease lot for 50 years, but he doesn't need a bank to borrow money. For the Tofino Aerospace lots, we are looking to register them. Luckily, there is no contamination in those specific areas. So we're going to be proceeding with doing a registration, and hopefully we won't run into any hiccups on that. That's one of the components that we've had major challenges on in the past that we think worked through on this. We've also been working with our First Nation partners. So we want to make sure that Tloquit First Nation is supportive of this because we need First Nation support if we're going to be registering, but in general, we are looking towards a memorandum of understanding and working together in partnership on land use planning and management. So luckily, this is aligned fairly well as we've been discussing the memorandum of understanding and also these lease applications and other applications. We have received support from Tloquit for this. We have also, within those lease agreements, we have a 3% contribution to community that the ACRD would receive. So that'll be an annual amount, 3% of the lease amount, the annual lease amount we will receive, and we will transfer to the Tloquit First Nation in recognition of their community's closeness and the need for an economic benefit for the airport operations. We also will be receiving, in addition to lease fees eventually, we have airport maintenance charges that will be annually received as soon as these leases go into effect. That'll be in the range of, I believe, $2,000 a year. So we will be receiving that. That is the intent of that fee is to go towards maintenance of the road and general maintenance of the civil infrastructure that's there. And then the water fees for both of those or for the lease lots. So each individual consumer unit will pay the water fees, even though they've just constructed extended water, they still have to pay their water fees. So we will be trying to recover costs for ongoing existing of those lease rates. But when it comes, one of the components of this lease that I think is an interesting component, and hopefully I can explain clearly, is the idea of a rent credit. So the applicants and proponents, because they're going to be upfronting and investing in this capital infrastructure that we as the ACRD currently do not have the capital money to do. We are trying to do the pump station upgrade this year, and we are barely have enough money in the capital reserve to get that done, but we do, so that's good. But we certainly do not have $500,000, $750,000 to build new road and water simply to develop lease lots. If we, and I just can't see us raising that additional revenue to do that unless we went out for a referendum to get community assent for that. So the alternative to not having a developer sort of fast-tracked infrastructure investment is that we would wait until we either could build up the capital reserves, or we go to the community to ask them for support to basically borrow money to invest to get development so that we can generate more lease revenues. So the benefit or win-win situation that this proposal does is it actually allows this development to go forward sooner than it would if we waited for the ACRD to develop those. In exchange for having this fast track done, we're proposing that we basically do a rent credit. So for that $580,000 of capital investment, we will then waive the lease fees until that amount has been used up. So that because of the proposed rates, that works out to about 10 years. So within 10 years, all of the rent credit will be used for that value. So and then the other component is the latecomer agreement. So if we had other developers come in early and say they decide to choose to develop the next two lots, their component or proposed portion of that infrastructure would then reduce down the rent credit, which simply means that the developers would get paid back a little bit of the rent credit sooner, but then they would have to start paying their lease fees earlier. So there's only one bulk amount of rent credit, and that is the amount for the road and water, which we are actually very happy to let them get the benefit for, because it saves us from borrowing and allows us to move forward quickly. And then they will start paying that fee, their lease fees back to the ACRD as soon as that rent credit is exhausted. We've had extensive legal review. I think that's all of the items that I can think of for now, and maybe I'll pass it over to Lawrence to speak a bit more about the actual Tofino Aerospace application, which is kind of a little bit more unique and interesting as opposed to the hangar development for Dennis, which is relatively straightforward.
Thank you, Jenny. Lawrence, please go ahead.
Thanks much, Jenny. Chair, directors, and all the staff at ACRD, thanks much for inviting me to come along and speak here. Just give me a second, I'm going to do this. Oh, is it? Sorry, was I speaking too close?
Yeah, so we've had a few comments from people online saying they're having trouble hearing. So yeah, so we adjusted it, but that's, yeah, it is a little louder in here, but
yeah. We all good? Yeah.
That's looking right.
Yep.
Yeah. So my name is Lawrence Francie. I'm from Tofino Aerospace. I'm a resident of Tofino. As a little background about me, I've been fundamentally committed to develop technology and business that helps address the major challenge of climate change. I did that in a previous company through designing advanced technology electric motors, developing company. We ended up with 250 staff in 3 countries, and it's still going. We've completed multiple government and academically partnered R&D projects, and I bring that background to Tofino Aerospace as a little context. So it's all about addressing fundamental challenges and creating global opportunities. And how will we do that? Our aim is to develop long-range unpiloted, so UAV, unpiloted air vehicle services, patrol, data collection, conservation management, emergency response, and cargo. These are underserved in Canada. Unfortunately, we use United States and other countries' teams and businesses to carry out those activities for government departments here in Canada. Also, we want to do technology development for next generation low and zero emissions aircraft and ground operations support. We very much like to see Tofino come forefront facility for zero emission regional airliners. That's Air Canada. They've just invested multiple millions in Heart Aerospace, electric airliner. So, time of critical challenges in the protection and management of natural resources. Massive environmental changes, greenhouse gas emissions, global warming affecting all kinds of things, particularly noticeable in our province and our coastal waters, and the effect that has on our fauna ecosystem. Very significant food chain vulnerability. That's a krill bloom, another thing that's important to monitor and understand why it's being so degraded and affected, but there are obvious need to monitor it. Illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, whether that's specifically fishing itself, the type of fishing, or the activity, the manner in which fishing is carried out. We have a huge economic zone just in this province that it's very challenging, I'll get to in a minute, to monitor. Illegal waste dumping and tank flushing, the plan in place in the EEZ to stop that huge area where tank flushing currently is allowed to occur will mean that there's going to be a much more significant monitoring requirement for that area, because operators and ships that are used to just flushing there will now have to not flush throughout the EEZ if that comes on stream. And obviously increasing wildfires become incredible over the last few years, how even out here on the island we're affected by this issue and drifting smoke, etc. So, oh yeah, missed this one. Increasing risk from bad actors, specific Atlantic areas, fishing for all kinds of hook bait and other things in areas without licenses, etc. Canada, particularly, we have enormous areas to cover and protect. So there's definitely efforts to address these challenges. Obviously, they're global topics, and they've grown, but they must accelerate. So, as an example, Department of Fisheries Ocean have the Dash 8 Patrol Program by an Eastern Canadian aerospace company, but only one aircraft covers the West Coast, 351,000 square kilometers EEZ. That doesn't include all the inland waterways, and there's only 3 to the east. I'm not going to mention the north because it's not really covered. Unfortunately, that's a $128 million program for just 5 years. DFO doesn't own the aircraft; they're just leasing them. They're 30-year-old planes. It's incredibly expensive and unfortunately very limited, really, to what's needed. Yeah, so just everybody knows what that means, but it's a vast area. Global warming is making the northern oceans that much more critical to monitor as well. Okay, so another example, increasing in firefighting capability, but observation, command, and control crewed helos are exceptionally expensive as an example to operate, so are other crewed aircraft. It limits the ability of provinces and territories to actually do pervasive, persistent, long-distance firefighting and really stay on top of things 24/7 in difficult conditions. Zero emission aircraft technology development, DHL is an example of an early company investing there, but nothing's in regular service yet. So UAVs and zero emission aircraft can contribute solutions to both sides of the challenges mentioned. UAVs enable the observation of vast areas at much lower cost and much higher efficiency than either much lower or zero environmental impact. Data collected can generate new conservation insights and conservation levers. It's already being used. An example I was reminded of this morning, I know colleagues in an American organization that are doing North Atlantic right whale monitoring to protect from ship collisions in Gulf of St. Lawrence. things that would just never have been imagined before, and it's all done with UAVs. Patrol projection can come real time across west, north, and east coast. This does not exist currently, and it's fundamental, something that we need to do if we want to protect those environments. Development of zero-emission aircraft technology combined with sustainable energy generation can help take CO2 out of aviation. This is a huge challenge for the next 10, 15 years. Just as over the last 15 with road vehicles, we were part of the paradigm shift, and that's still part of it. I aim to take Tofino Aerospace and help us be part of that shift for aircraft. We're working with communities, governments, academia. We'll use long-range and long-endurance UAVs to support fishing, so DFO type activities, protecting fish stocks and the ecosystem. We'll use newly developing technology that allows multi-spectral observation to improve the understanding of what's actually going on, and therefore improve conservation that way. This shows the scale of the EZ and some of the biosphere reserves, and also illustrates why Tofino LBO is so well positioned as a base of operations. And for example, emergency response, UAVs are particularly suited. They can operate 24 hours a day in terrible conditions, mitigate risk on personnel and pilot fatigue, don't require a base station built near the fire, as helos often do, and can be operated from very great distances at very low cost. So with technology partners, our UAVs will also be used as test platforms for the urban air transport zero-emission development aircraft. There's a huge movement currently going on for the term is commonly used air taxis, but effectively it's zero emissions urban transport or short-range urban air transport. And we'll leverage Site's electric drives experience technology in that. These are just examples of what our motors have gone into. So multiple applications and opportunities, urban air transport I mentioned, there are many like this. Regional passenger aircraft, that's hard, but they're just one of many others. They just have some fantastic partners going on. The sector length that can do as a completely zero emissions airliner, 30-seat, will take you with a safety factor from Vancouver to Tofino, which would be fantastic if we could be one of the lead airports doing that. UAVs and drones, there's progress in the area to take what is already a very, very small emissions and pollution signature and CO2 signature that UAVs generate, because they're that much more efficient than normal aircraft. But they are also electrifying. So once they're electrified, you can obviously, depending on the sustainable source of electricity, you can operate them completely sustainable. Okay, thank you. Is that okay for time?
That's great for time. You're just under. Okay, so could you stop sharing that? Okay, you've this. I could talk for hours about this, but I think I'll stop. Dr. Boyko up first, and then Dr. Steer second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I think you got a great economic opportunity here. There's land available. There are flights in and around the airport, but there's lots of space to run around drones and stuff like that. I think your biggest challenge is something that Director Steer might want to talk about is the housing for your staff, because everybody has challenges with that in the West Coast here. That would probably be your biggest challenge moving forward. Thank you.
You want to respond first?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That is a fundamental challenge for any economic activity in the peninsula. And yes, we in Senate, I very much developed apprenticeship programs. At every site we chose to operate at, I wanted to develop the local talent ecosystem. If you train people who are local to you, very often they'll want to stay local to you. And Tofino has, and the whole peninsula has, a huge advantage that people tend to love it and live there because they choose to. So if you can train and develop a local talent pool, you have a long-term set of relationships and employment opportunities. That's that's how I've done it in the past. We got to 250 staff with, well, so far we've got 250 staff with SETA. I very much want to do the same thing here.
Next up, I have Dr. Steer and then Dr. McEwen. Did I miss anyone? Ah, thanks.
Great, thank you through the chair. Thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate the extra piece of information there. I'm very supportive of the project, of course, and my questions to staff revolve mostly around the servicing infrastructure that will be transferred over to the regional district, that inclusive of the water main and the road. And I was just a little bit curious about the potential for septic and the connections going in there, whether it is their own system or if there is capacity within ours. And then I'll further to that in terms of the creation of these new assets that will become the ACRDs. And in terms of our long-term asset management plan, I'm sure it's being done, that will be captured in the asset management, that long-term funding for replacement, maintenance, and all those wonderful things in terms of our reserve programs for those. So I'll leave it at that. Oh, and I just had one last comment in the report itself. For me, one of the most exciting parts about this is the discussions between TFN and the ACRD, and that collaborative approach, and knowing that we are going to have an MOU and the work that's going to be done in the long-term planning process. This is one of the more exciting aspects, to be honest, of this application for me, and I really commend staff on the creative approach that they've moved towards this. And then the last thing I'll just mention is in the land use and development plan, one of the things in your report, it speaks to in the last paragraph on policy and legislation, in the land use plan, it will increase airport runway activity and traffic, which is the highest value of airport lands. And I'm hoping in the new plan that we will have a conversation about what the highest values of the land will be. And I know it's a little more outside of the scope of this, but I would certainly like to be participating in that conversation. So I'll leave it there.
I'm wondering, Jen, you wanted to cover off the questions first and then pass it off if you need to.
Through the chair, thank you. So excellent, thank you. I didn't talk too much about the infrastructure and the process that we're going to be undertaking. So the process that we've developed and is sort of laid out in the lease agreement is that right now we have a cost estimate of $580,000. And in order to really move forward, we need board approval to enter into the agreement, because otherwise we're getting huge amounts of investment on both sides going into the project. So what we have is it's a placeholder amount, and then the language is written that the actual amount once we are done, so the absolute construction cost, which may vary from that cost estimate, will be the amount that we are sort of tagging as what will be the right credit. So we have a conceptual design right now. We will be going to sort of detailed design that goes to the ACRD for review. We're going to be engaging independent engineers to help us review and make sure that the infrastructure is sound into our standards. Then once we review and approve, we're also going to have oversight before we accept. So once the works are substantially complete and have met the drawings that we have approved, then we sign off and say, okay, great, they're substantially complete. We run them for 1 year. Once the maintenance period is over, then we will accept the works. Then that infrastructure now becomes ours to manage and maintain, just like the rest of the infrastructure at the airport. The sewer is a good question. We are not sure yet. So we are looking at options on what that looks like. There are two options because we do have a community system there. The board is probably aware that we did a $6 million grant application to the Strategic Priorities Fund, which we were not successful for to address sewer. We have some issues that we need to deal with, which might be more urgent than we know, and we're digging into that right now. So it's very timely. Once we know what the solution to that is, and whether that means expanding our existing system to be more of a community septic system that has capacity to take on not only this development, but also development for that entire apron, then we'll have an idea. And we're sort of working through just the details of that and the design. The civil works will incorporate one of those two things. So it will either design the extension of this work so that they can connect to that community septic system, or it will show exactly what they're going to do, whether that's holding tanks or on-site septic systems. Again, this is going to be through the review and approval process through staff and our engineering support. So that's how that's all going to go. The other comment that I thought, I love to hear the word asset management. Yes, we want to be doing proper asset management. So the challenge with the airport right now is the small number of customers that are currently connected to the water system. A traditional water system, we basically would charge the water fees, which would recover the revenue in order to not only operate, but then also go and put away money for capital. So we're going to be shifting to that model where the water rates will try to be cost recovery for that. In the interim, we have the airport maintenance charge, and we're going to be looking at other charges that are specific to address the asset management gap. We're working with finance on those, like how to transition and get a handle on the airport, because it's not just the civil infrastructure, it is everything there. But it is really important, and it is definitely on our radar.
Thank you. Next up, I have Dr. McEwen and then Dr. Siga.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is a very exciting project. I have a question just for my own curiosity. My husband has a license to fly drones, and part of the legal requirement of that license is that he cannot fly them within a certain radius of an aerodrome. So I'm assuming that you have something that supersedes that and possibly a lot more insurance than what my husband pays.
Director McEwen, thank you for the question. Yeah, all UAV flight activities are, and they're on a somewhat different scale from drones that you may be familiar with. A UAV is really a small to medium to even large aircraft. They have to have the same level of rigor and certification to operate as conventional aircraft, and Transport Canada have to approve the activity. In fact, the Right Whale project Northern Atlantic Right Whale project that I mentioned, that is actually Transport Canada contracting that foreign company. So in the same way, we will aim to work with Transport Canada and other departments, because we know that we're one of the first companies across Canada that's going to be doing this. Our aim is very much to work with the different government departments initially to actually develop this infrastructure and ecosystem. But it's on a pretty different scale of certification. You are highly unlikely to go out and buy one of these unless you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. And also, you have to be licensed. You need, I call them uncrewed, because the crew is not aboard the aircraft, but you have UAV pilots at a controlled base station. So they're a very different level of technology. I've got a whole other presentation with it. I can just chuck a couple of images up if anybody needs, just to sort of see, show and tell can sometimes be clearer. Does that help as an answer? Yes, thank you. I assumed that you had a much more rigorous protocol to go through than just a regular drone pilot.
Thank you. I have Dr. Siga and then Dr. Cote.
Thank you very much. The presentation was amazing, fascinating, but you're aware of the proximity to the national park and to the Grace, the inlet there. So going back to the concern about septic contamination, it's pretty critical that we get a hold on that. That I think is my only concern at the moment. And wow, congratulations on such a well thought out project. And Jenny, thank you.
Okay, great. Next up, we have Dr. Cote.
Thank you. Dr. McEwen actually asked my question about the drone within the airport area being restricted. I guess I'll just leave it at that. But my question is, should I be actually buying the EV, or will you be creating like those flying cars that I'm hearing about these days?
Thank you, Direct. Sorry. Okay, Okay, twice. All right. Okay. Thank you, Director. If I may actually also address your concern, Director Seeley, if I may. Absolutely, I think it's completely valid. I thought this presentation was really important. And I always take a holistic approach, and it's really challenging to do development progress whilst being very conscious of your carbon pyramid and your impact in actually carrying out the activity. So I'm very, very conscious of that. What's great at having ACRD as a landlord is that ACRD is also exceptionally conscious about it. You know, if this was a private landlord that owned this airport, the conversations would be very, very different. You know, where's sewage going to go? Where's the septic system going to go? I know that the current septic system, where it's located, and the rigor that ACRD are going to put in to making sure that this is done safely is reassuring from my point of view, because it keeps us to very high standards. I'm absolutely passionate about conservation and what ecosystems give to communities. And, you know, Pacific Rim National Park is a donut, and this isn't my phrase, it's a ACRD member's phrase, but effectively it's a donut, and the airport is the tin bit in the middle. And but it's, you know, so it forms this, it's very, very complex function. It's an incredibly important economic driver to the entire peninsula at the same time. And it's somewhat an endowment from the past, because to build this facility now would cost hundreds of millions. Yeah, it would be impossible. Yeah. But also just to return it to its previous format would cost tens, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars to remove that material. So to make use of it at the same time as doing so in a less harmful way, I think is fundamental. And that's what I very much hope to be part of going forwards with low emission and zero emission aircraft, bringing in sustainable aviation fuel, which is a whole different conversation. But all those sides of it, from my point of view, I'd love to think that there will be a day when that's silent, zero emitting, and doesn't create any impact on the park. Oh, and ideally has micro tidal generation at the old salmon farms in the Clackpot inlets. But that's a whole different set of future conversations.
Thank you. I have.
Sorry, Derek, I did not answer your question today.
It might have been more rhetorical. But
Yeah, I was just wondering if I should be pursuing my EV or one of those flying cars.
I would get one of those for 15 to 20 years.
Thank you. I have Director Steer and then Director Roth.
I was just going to read the motion when the time came, Chair Jack.
Okay, then I'll come back to you after Dr. Roth.
I'm just curious. Well, first of all, I love the idea of looking after the right whales. But I'm curious if we could use that technology instead of LiDAR for mapping purposes or for the purposes of the type of work that we do.
We being
Director, that's definitely a possibility. I would also, I never believe in just winning business when there's a better solution. And I would suggest that the rate of progress with low Earth orbit satellite observational technology, in fact, my partner in the road build, the civil road build, Dennis Blurinas, his company in the multi-social alliance, so he can probably talk to that. There are now many satellite service providers that can help automate things like that. There are still situations where UAVs are definitely the best way to do it. We want to go maritime first, get all the wrinkles ironed out. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a huge range of services that UAVs, and Canada's quite a big place, so it's hard to get to lots of parts of it. So there is definitely a capability there. But I just want to reiterate, we're not going to be flying drones around the airport. That's not, if it's landing and taking off, it's not doing anything useful for us. So they have endurances of between 20 and 50 hours. And so the distances they travel and how how enduringly they can operate, to put that in perspective.
Thank you. So just before we go to the motions with Director Steer, quick comments. I am really excited with the applications, the technology that's being developed. When it comes to the ocean, I can think of things that can be done with dipping sonar off a cable into the ocean itself. The applications with just infrared camera for fighting fires, finding lost people, tracking wolves, tracking ungulates like Roosevelt elk. All of these applications are things that are very important that could come out of this kind of conversation. I look forward to how that progresses. I think, however, one step at a time, let's get these leases in place, perhaps. Director Steer, if you will.
Thank you, Chair Jack. Just quickly, Chair Jack, can I do all the motions in one, or do you want each that separate?
I think they have to be separate because they reference different individual companies or interests.
Right, thank you. That the ACRD Board of Directors approve entering into a long-term lease agreement with Doe Pix Hit Aviation Inc. for lease lot LSL 2023002 at the Long Beach Airport, effective July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2073 at market rate plus applicable taxes and provisions for rent credit for the construction of the civil works for Apron 2 development.
Second.
Oh, got in there. Thank you, Director Miska. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Please continue.
That the ACRD Board of Directors approve entering into a long-term lease agreement with Virtual Exponential Improvement Corp. Tofino Aerospace for lease lots LSL 2023003-T1, T2, T4 at the Long Beach Airport, effective July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2073 at market rate plus applicable taxes and provision for rent credit for the construction of civil works for Apron 2 development.
Second.
Thank you, Director McEwen. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you.
That the ACRD Board of Directors approve entry into a latecomer agreement with DL Co Ventures Inc. effective July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2038 for the transfer of latecomer charges for the construction of civil works for Apron 2 development.
Second.
Thank you, Director McEwen. Should be applied. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
And finally, that the ACRD Board of Directors direct staff to create a latecomer charges bylaw to support the collection and payment of latecomer fees.
Second.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that's it. Thank you for your presentation, and please leave contact information behind.
Chair, the dipping sonar, I'd love to have a conversation about, and the Roosevelt, the rest we're sort of on the ball with, but yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sound.
Okay, that brings us to the next item, which is the 2023-2024 annual operating agreement between BC Transit and the ACRD. I don't know who that is. Oh, there's Eddie. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff are looking for the board to approve the execution of the 2023-24 annual operating agreement, or AOA, between BC Transit and the ACRD. The good news was that in 2022-23, we saw ridership surpass the pre-COVID levels. There were approximately 16,500 trips delivered in the 22-23 fiscal year, and pre-COVID levels were around that 15,900 mark. They're up substantially from the prior year, 12,129, and BC Transit anticipates that the ridership continues to grow, and they've estimated approximately 18,000 trips in 2023-24. To speak to this a bit more, BC Transit will bring a delegation to the board later in the summer and present a copy of their annual performance study upon its completion. In 2022-23, the ACRD did not use its total allotment of funds from the Safe Restart program due to lower than expected operating costs. So this means that we have kept an estimated balance of approximately $20,000 within the local transit reserve fund, which can be used in future years. This will really come in handy when we talk to our expansion that is upcoming. There was a 1,300-hour expansion planned for this year, but a provincial freeze on expansion funding has delayed this expansion. And this will also lead to a delay in the introduction of Saturday service until that provincial expansion freeze lifts. I do know there was some discussion last year about some language within the AOA, in particular, the use of the word municipality throughout the agreement. BC Transit has communicated that their language needs to be legally consistent with the BC Transit Act, which expressly refers to municipalities, but then includes the definition that a municipality includes a regional district or part of a regional district. So while they have sought to swap this out in prior years, they have been informed that this would run afoul of legislative drafting principles and potentially create legal ambiguity. So we still have the term municipality within the agreement. Staff do recommend the signing of this. So the net share of ACRD costs for 23-24 are $213,586. However, due to a surplus being carried over, the budget hit for the Custom Transit Service, as supported in the 2023-27 financial plan, is just $161,762. I'm free to answer any questions and look forward to them.
Okay, thank you. Director Boyko, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Chair. I just wondering when the last cost increase for the users has been, just because I don't really have a background on that. Thank you.
Yes, and through the chair, I'm not sure exactly when. The transit fares have stayed fairly stable at $2 per trip. I know as a part of the regional transit study that is taking place this year, they do look at do a little bit of a fare review within that. But it has been pretty consistent and steady at $2 for a while now.
Thank you very much. It'd be good to see a little bit of a history of that and compare it to inflation and cost. Thank you.
Maybe a comparison to other neighboring regional districts as well. Director Cote?
Thank you. This Handy Dart Transit has been an issue that Sprout Lake has looked at continually over the years. And I have to say that it has improved greatly for my area. Probably 16 years ago, we took a look at the ridership for Sprout Lake, and our portion per ride was about $799 one way. So today, with the numbers that Terry's provided me with, I'm pleased to say it's gone down to $120 per ride. The average ride through the all of our regional district is approximately $11 per ride. The city being at $8.20 per ride. That's the taxation portion that we collect through our taxation. So I'm happy to see ridership at Sprout Lake increased. There was 301 rides, which is great. So we are actually getting the service. So I'm happy to support it going forward. I just have to, in my mind, break it down to rides. So when you're looking at taxation, but it's a huge improvement from what it was many years ago. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Minions?
Thank you. I do just want to note that additionally, the city does pay about $1 million a year for BC Transit services. So our cost per ride is probably significantly higher, as this really is all one service, just different portions of it. So we have a significant cost additionally, but understand Director Cote's comments, and it's great to see ridership has increased in the regional areas for this form of transit.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments? Dr. Sparrow and then Dr. Cote?
I have to ask, who has access to the service?
To Handy Dart specifically, or just transit?
Handy Dart, so is it open to the public, or is there criteria? What's the criteria?
Yeah, could you do a quick primer, Ed?
Yes, through the chair. So there is an application process to be eligible for the Handy Dart system. There could be a variety of reasons as to why you do need the service. So basically, I think we look at it, anyone who cannot reasonably use the conventional transit system. So whether that's walk 2 blocks to get to the bus or not. So you do go through an application process. There is the involvement of a doctor, and then that information is given to the local operating company for approval. So it isn't just anybody can use it, because it is a door-to-door service, and there are significant additional costs as compared to conventional transit when you talk about cost per ride. There really is, BC Transit does push to try and get as many riders as possible onto the conventional system as compared to the custom transit system, just because of that additional cost.
Thank you. Director Cote.
Thank you. Just an update. We were asking for a BC Transit study to look at a paratransit type service for the regional Alberni Valley area rather than specifically just to Sprout Lake. Is there any update on that? Thank you.
Yes, through the chair. So there is a regional study transit that is continuing to be worked on right now. So we're just working on kind of developing those public engagement strategies, and this will include that regional aspect that you were referring to.
Thank you for bringing that up, Director Cote. I'm of the belief myself that transit can be a solution for many people struggling with the cost of car ownership due to energy prices. No, it's not going to be for everybody the same way that veganism isn't for everybody. It's about having fewer steaks every day or during the week. It's not necessarily giving it up, so to speak. Ideally, it would be nice to see families being able to drop the car at some point in the future, but I think that's going to be restricted to more built up urban areas. That being said, having a study will help us plan ahead and what's going on. We should look at what's going on demographically and development wise as well. Yeah, this is exciting, and thank you for the work. Dr. Cote,
I'll move the motion.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roth. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item C, the Banfield Playground. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So we issued an RFP to do design and construction for the replacement of the playground at Centennial Park, or Eileen Scott Park in Banfield. We received 7 submissions. The proposals were reviewed by ACRD staff and the Banfield Parks Commission. The highest scoring proponent was Swing Time Distributors, and we are recommending award to that company, who will then work with the ACRD and the Parks Commission to remove the parks, finalize design, remove the equipment, install the new equipment, and we are hoping to have that project completed by September. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Director Beckett?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District ACRD Board of Directors award the Banfield Playground Elaine Scott Centennial Park replacement design and construction contract to Swing Time Distributors Limited, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the contract up to a maximum amount of $100,000 as per the approved financial plan.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any further comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I often thank staff, but this time I really want to thank staff. I had mentioned after talking to our Parks Commission that we would really love to get something in there this summer. And staff said, I don't know if that's possible, Director Bob, but we'll see what we can do. And I'm thrilled. It's going to be midsummer, I understand. We have nothing there, really. This is fantastic. I'm indebted to our staff for doing a great job. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the next item, which is item D, a notice on title for Strick Road. That sounds like it's Mike. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the property owners have recently reached out to staff after the agenda was put out, and are actively looking at options to bring this property into compliance and closing in a breezeway. So at this time, staff would recommend that this be deferred, and we would bring it back if and when it's necessary. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
You have comments? Dr. Ross, go ahead.
Can we, I would like to defer this for 6 months rather than 1 month. Because we just approved, I mean, it was approved to be deferred 1 month ago. And it came up again on the table fairly soon, so I'd like to put a time period in it this time.
Okay, Mike?
I can add it, but I would just say that if the time frame attached to it, that we only bring it back if it's required. If the building, if they have, we get a building permit application and the property is brought into compliance, we'll report back to the board that everything's complying with the bylaw, but we wouldn't need to bring back the notice on that.
Yeah, okay, I think that makes sense. Like if anything comes up, then it comes up, but if it's fine, then we don't have to bring it back. Dr. Ross, does that make sense?
Yeah, the reason I brought it up though is because it came back within 1 month. So I find that troublesome. So it's
Okay.
fine though, the way it's working.
Okay, yeah, I think the mechanism would just be we check in every month, but this way it's just, it doesn't come up if it doesn't have to, so that's okay. Any further comments? So should we, how should that look? Daniel?
If I can just address the why back in 1 month, the deferral was to have the additional information. And that information was provided by staff in the report. So that's why that's why the timeline is there. Or that's why it wasn't a timeline, but that's why the report came forward, is that at the end of the day, staff were reporting back on a matter that was deferred. It wasn't deferred for a specific period of time, to my knowledge. But if the board is passing a deferral, then you can defer it, and that's all we need is a motion for deferral.
Yeah, I do seem to remember it was going to be either at the next meeting or the next meeting that makes sense from a work perspective on creating the report. Dr. Ross, go ahead.
That's not what the report says though. Like if you read the backup for it, it was asking us to actually do a notice on title. So that's quite different than just reporting on information. But I'm fine with a deferral being open-ended.
Yeah, I believe that was the intention at the previous meeting in regards to asking for more information, and delaying was never going to delay the actual decision itself. So a recommendation is still required in briefing note. What the board does with that is a different question entirely. So that's the nature of the conversation. So there wasn't anything squirrely in that. So I think we just need to be aware of whenever we ask to defer an item for more information, that more information will come back, and it may or may not change the recommendation, which I think is the nature of this briefing note as well. Okay, you still haven't done a motion though. So how would we want to?
I'll move to defer the request, put a notice on title. Just to defer it and leave it at that.
For how long, or just in the open? Yeah. Okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Director Siga?
I'd just like to again thank staff for working towards the resolution, because it's very upsetting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, so now, oh, Director Boyko, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to read it with my hand there, but I want to thank you, Chair. I want to kind of copy what Director Sega just mentioned there, that I want to thank you to staff for putting together a report. I mean, I have some questions in detail about some certain things and the timing of it, but I know it's a challenging thing, and thanks for working through it, and hopefully we can get to a resolution on this property that makes everybody happy. Appreciate it.
Good, thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried, thank you. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is item E, which is a request for decision regarding the ACRD emergency program update. It's my understanding that Heather, you have a quick PowerPoint to help present the information. So hopefully you've been cleared to share from your computer, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you see that?
Yes, you'll have to actually hit share though, or present.
Hang on. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a request for decision in front of you, and I thought I would use some visuals to help explain it because it is a bit convoluted. So the report in front of you is to support the adoption of a regulatory bylaw for the emergency program. So currently we have 3 separate services for the emergency program. So we have the Alberni Valley Emergency Service, which is the 4 Alberni Valley electoral areas plus the city of Port Alberni. Then we have a separate emergency service for Bamfield and a separate one for Long Beach. And I'm not proposing to make any changes to the services. There's been a political desire in the past to keep each of these services separate due to differing levels of service for each community. So there's no proposed changes to that. But under the Emergency Program Act, we are required to have a regulatory bylaw. And currently we only have a regulatory bylaw for the Alberni Valley. We don't have one for Bamfield or Long Beach. So the regulatory bylaw is a bylaw that identifies an emergency management organization. It can define communities. It appoints an emergency program coordinator, and it defines spending limits. So what is proposed is to repeal the existing Alberni Valley regulatory bylaw and replace it with an ACRD emergency program regulatory bylaw. And this one bylaw would apply to each of the 3 services. So the bylaw will define the emergency program. It'll set the structure for the committees. It will appoint the emergency program coordinator, and it will define the spending limits during an emergency. And there's some changes proposed in the bylaw that will allow the existing committee structure to be expanded to be more inclusive of Bamfield and Long Beach. Because right now the existing committee structure is solely focused on the Alberni Valley, which doesn't reflect the regional program that we provide. So the top row that you see on the screen is the existing structure. And then the bottom row in yellow is the proposed structure. So I'll go through each group or committee. So the green box is the Alberni Valley Emergency Planning Policy Group, and the current membership is just the 4 EA directors from the Alberni Valley, as well as the mayor and all of City Council. And then there's also non-voting members, which includes Sashat Hupachesset and the Bamfield director. So this group has not met for a long time, mainly because the emergency projects that we've been focusing on have been more regionally focused. And this committee doesn't reflect the committee membership that we need to discuss things that impact the whole region. So when I've been focusing on emergency grants, I've been bringing these items to the regional or the board table because that's where the entire membership is. So the change in the bylaw will change this committee structure to an ACRD executive committee versus just an Alberni Valley structure. And the membership will include all of the EA directors. It will include the City of Port Alberni mayor or their designate, 1 city councillor. And then the board also has the option of appointing any non-voting member that they choose, which could be First Nations. The bylaw also permits the board to create subcommittees or working groups at the sub-regional level if that is desired. And then the second committee I want to talk about is the Alberni Valley Emergency Planning Liaison Group, showed in blue. And this is a group of emergency response agencies in the Alberni Valley and Bamfield. We've been meeting on a quarterly basis, and this group has been functioning quite well. But the change is to change the name of the group from an Alberni Valley focus to an ACRD focus and include membership from across the region from other emergency agencies. And then the final change is the pink box at the top right, and that's just the Alberni Valley Leadership Group. And this is a staff level group between the regional district and the city. And there's no change to the membership. It's just changing the name of the title of the group to ACRD Emergency Program Leadership Group to reflect that the regional district staff that are on that group reflect the whole or represent the whole region. And then finally, there's no changes to this structure, but I just wanted to talk about this structure as a reminder. So when we activate the Emergency Operations Center during a emergency, the policy group is key in supporting the EOC and making certain decisions, as well as declaring a local state of emergency. But the policy group really depends on where the emergency is located. So if the emergency is within the boundaries of the city of Port Alberni, the policy group is the mayor, council, and the city CAO. But if emergency occurs outside of the city, the board is the policy group and the city or the ACRD CAO. And then if the event crosses both the regional district boundary and the city boundary, the policy group would be made up of the mayor, the ACRD chairperson, and both CAOs. But again, there's no structure changed to this. I just wanted to mention it as a side note. So the structure that I've laid out in the regulatory bylaw is recommended as it avoids duplication of roles, and it utilizes the staff resources that we currently have. So there's resolutions in the report if you choose to adopt this bylaw today. There's also a resolution to adopt the terms of reference for the executive committee. And then there's a resolution to appoint the emergency program coordinator. And I realize that's a lot of information, but I would be happy to answer questions or comments from the board.
Thank you for that. Director Cote and then Director Steer.
Thank you. So on your last slide with the Emergency Operations Center activation, this is all for the city of Port Alberni, and I thought we were including the West Coast, Long Beach and Bamfield emergency services also. So it doesn't really reflect that. Events occurring in the city of Port Alberni and the ACRD, it could be happening in multiple areas. So I'm thinking that maybe there should be another bullet or something like that, like the last one, events occurring in the city of Port Alberni and ACRD. It could be happening in Cherry Creek and the city. So I'd like to see the area director involved in that conversation as well. Thanks.
Yeah, and if I may just comment on that. So the legislation states that the chairperson, the board chairperson, is the person that has to declare the state of local emergency. But the legislation also states that that chairperson needs to consult with other area directors, other board members. So they would be required to do that. They would do every best effort to make contact with that area director. But at the end of the day, they are ultimately responsible for declaring a state of local emergency. So it has to be, the chairperson has to be involved in that decision unless they are unavailable, and then it would default to the vice chair.
Did you have any follow-up?
Just that the West Coast isn't included.
So yes, it's actually the middle box. So an event occurring outside of the city of Port Alberni. So the policy group would be the ACRD board and the ACRD city or chief administrative officer.
Follow-up, so would the incorporated areas, Tofino, Ucluelet not also be included?
No, because they have their own emergency operations center, so they have their own policy group. So the district of Ucluelet would have their mayor and council, and Tofino would have their mayor and council.
Okay. Thank you, Director Steer, and then Director McEwen.
Great. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Heather. This is a very elegant solution to the legislative requirements for the upcoming emergency program. So I do commend you on the work done on this. It fits very well. I just a quick question on the new ACRD emergency network. Some of the proposed emergency response groups that you may be tapping into. Are you specifically looking at the municipal volunteer fire departments, or potentially what other response groups were you thinking? I'm thinking WESAR possibly, and maybe some others that I may not have thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. WESAR for sure. The fire chief from the district of Ucluelet has been a part of that network for a long time, even though it's really centered on the Alberni Valley. But yeah, any group that wants to join, we do have a big exercise on the West Coast next week. So we're going to be engaging with many response agencies on the West Coast, Parks Canada, BC Ambulance. So there's definitely opportunity to network and see who else wants to join this network.
Thank you, Director McEwen.
Thank you, through the chair. I may be missing something, but when you first introduced this request for decision, you mentioned that you wanted to repeal the original bylaw, and yet I don't see any recommendations that state that the original bylaw is going to be repealed.
It's actually written right into the bylaw. So it's the last statement in the actual bylaw, PS 1012.
Oh, so it doesn't need to be voted on then. It's just part and parcel of it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's like legislation. Like, you don't need to repeal legislation. You can just amend it by deleting everything and replacing it. I think that's the same process with bylaws, or can be. Daniel, go ahead.
If I can just add one element, because I know Director Cote had just with the discussion around the West Coast. If you recall, we had looked into the creation of a service that would include the West Coast, and that did not come to fruition in terms of not the attempt. We certainly had the attempt and the discussion, but the feeling there and the decision there was that it was better left to Tofino, Ucluelet, and the ACRD. And so it doesn't mean that we're not collaborating. We are certainly collaborating. We certainly aim to train together, as Heather was saying, we're doing a West Coast training together. We are setting up a structure so we can keep open dialogue, but at this time, it's just felt that it's more useful for the West Coast to have their own for Tofino, their own for Ucluelet, and we coordinate with theirs as part of the ACRD. That's different from what we've chosen to do with Port Alberni, which is a unified, more of a unified joint command, and that's why you see it differently in our plan.
And what Port Alberni is chosen. Yeah, okay. So with that, then we do have a suite of motions to go through. Do we have any comments before we get to those? And if we do, who would like to read them out? Thank you, Dr. Roth. Microphone now.
Move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give first reading to the bylaw cited in bylaw PS 1012, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Program bylaw.
We do have a second there. Thank you, Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give second reading to the bylaw cited as bylaw PS 1012, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Program bylaw.
Any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. I saw Deb put her hand up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I didn't say that well. That was my problem. My fault. Okay. So seeing no comments, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give third reading to bylaw cited as bylaw TS 1012 Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Program bylaw.
And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Siga. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And carried. Thank you.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt bylaw cited as bylaw TS 1012 Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Program bylaw.
The seconder. Thank you, Director Siga. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve the terms of reference for the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Emergency Program Executive Committee as presented.
Second. Thank you, Director Sparrow. Seeing no comments, all those in favor? Motion carried.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors appoint the Protective Services Manager as the Emergency Program Coordinator.
Seconded by Director Siga. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to planning matters. However, once again, we use the washroom. So I'm wondering if we can come back at 9:40 or sorry, 3:46. 3:46, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Got about 30 seconds. Okay, let's confirm that we have, oh, Dr. Siga. No, if you have to go to the washroom, go to the washroom. No. Are you sure? Okay. She's used to driving to the West Coast. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 9.1A in planning matters. So municipal and First Nations members do count towards quorum, so please don't let us know you're leaving if you leave. But those of you in the room, please stick around. With that, we have item A Long Beach item. Mike, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just a really brief recap. So a public hearing was held on March 30th for the South Long Beach OCP. It then received second and third reading at the April 12th meeting, and I am happy to present this bylaw to the board, the South Long Beach OCP for adoption consideration, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Siga? Oh, you got his microphone.
Thank you. I move that the South Long Beach Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw, the memorandum and the bylaw P1447, Official Community Plan text and maps. No, sorry.
It's just it's not like one underneath that.
Yeah, that bylaw P1447, South Long Beach Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw be adopted. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. Roth. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next up is item 9.1B, a Sprout Lake item. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is a property at 7956 Pacific Rim Highway on the way in Sprout Lake area. These bylaws received second and third reading December 14th, following a November 28th public hearing. The OCP amendment designates a portion of the property industrial, and zoning bylaw would rezone the property to light industrial use. All conditions of rezoning have been met, and the board can now proceed with adoptions of bylaws P1411 and P1412. As always, happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Cote.
Thank you. I would move the recommendation that bylaw P1411 Sprout Lake Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roth, for seconding. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. I think there's the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I would move that bylaw P1412 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roth. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Item C is a temporary use permit, also Sprout Lake. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, so this is a temporary use permit for 6341 Solal Road. This temporary use permit would allow a short-term vacation rental to operate. The required advertising and notices have been sent out and advertised in the paper. The HRD did receive one letter in opposition, and the author has subsequently sent a follow-up letter attached as the late item, now supporting the application. So staff recommended the temporary use permit be issued, and happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. I would move that the Board of Directors issue temporary use permit TUP 10001.
Thank you, Dr. Roth, for seconding. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Well, I think that's some good work by the owners at that point, having conversations. It was good to get out there and talk. Item D, Beaver Creek. Go ahead.
Yes, so this is the first of a series of rezoning adoptions for consideration in Beaver Creek. So this is a property at 6134 Wadena Road. The application is to rezone 2.25 acre, this 2.25 acre property to RA3 with the intention to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision. All conditions of rezoning have been met, and staff recommend that the bylaw be adopted, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Any further comments? Please go ahead, Dr. Roth.
I move that bylaw P 1452 Regional District of Alberni Quaypot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Great. Okay, next one, we'll just wait for Dr. Sparrow to head out the door. He's going to barely find a place to sit and then have to come back up. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, so this is a property at 5605 Mercy Road. The application is to rezone a 4-acre property to a residential use. So the original application was to RA3, but following the review by the wastewater practitioner, it was concluded that it was more appropriate and would meet the surge regulations if they were a 1-acre minimum parcel size rather than the 0.6. So the board amended that at the last board meeting. Again, this was considered on April 12th, and all conditions of rezoning have now been met, and staff recommend the bylaw be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Roth.
I move that bylaw P 1456 Regional District of Alberni Quaypot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Seconded by Dr. Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, hopefully someone can, yeah. You can just pick it up when you sit down, Mike.
So this is a rezoning application for a property at 5597 Strict Road. The application is to rezone a portion of this property to RA3 to allow for a proposed 3-lot subdivision. And this one also has had all the conditions of rezoning met, and we recommend that the bylaw be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Roth.
I move that bylaw P 1470 Regional District of Alberni Quaypot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. And finally, item G, also Beaver Creek. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, so I feel a little bit like a broken record, but they are all separate properties. So this is a property at 6038 Kirkpatrick Road East. The application is to rezone a 2.8-acre property to RA3 and for a proposed 3-lot subdivision. And again, all the conditions have been met. And recommend the bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Dr. Roth.
I move that bylaw P 1471 Regional District of Alberni Quaypot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Siga. See no comments. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. Alrighty, that takes us into reports. First one is 10.1, our staff reports. Would anyone, including staff, like to pull anything out? And see none, could we have a motion to receive the reports, please? Thank you, Dr. Roth, seconded by Dr. Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. People are waking up. They're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, that brings us to item 2.2. There are no committee reports as far as I can tell. That brings us to 10.3, which are member reports. First up is 911 Corporation. Please go ahead, Dr. Beckett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I attended a meeting on March 17th. Management from Ecom 911 Corporation did a presentation with respect to their organization and the services that they provide. They focused on call volume and performance based on concerns surrounding BC Ambulance Service, lack of staff or difficulty in staffing, resulting in long waits that put people on hold. Good news is that BC Ambulance Service is working on improving their staffing situation, which will then result in the waits on 911 being reduced. We also discussed the 911 upgrades, the next generation 911 upgrades. Good news is the province is kicking in $90 million grant, which will hopefully reduce or completely alleviate the need for levy amounts in the future. So that was good news on that account, and that is my report, sir.
Thank you for that. Next up is the Vancouver Island Regional Library. Director Quinte.
Thank you. So the Bureau had the opportunity to do a presentation at AVIC convention, and it was called Fully Booked Why Our Libraries Are Booming. No, libraries do that. It was really well received, I hear, and they also had a complimentary table in our trade show. So very grateful for that and well received. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Minions isn't here. Anyone from the Alberni Valley have a report? Going once, going twice. Okay, so no report. Next up is Air Quality Council. Dr. Roth.
The meeting minutes are attached from March and you haven't met since.
Thank you for that. Next up is, oh, go ahead, Director Cote.
Just a question about page 146. And it members indicated interest in improving community surveillance of open burning. Fire departments could play a monitoring role. However, this would be outside their normal scope of duties. So I'm wondering if this is going to be something that the air quality is going to ask that committee, or if regional district staff will be asking that.
Go ahead, Director Roth.
I believe that was asked, it was going to be asked to the regional district. I don't remember exactly the conversation. I do remember the conversation, but I'm not sure what way it is. But I think we decided that it wasn't something that, it was something outside of our jurisdiction, so that we'd be asking the CRD.
Okay, thank you for that. That brings us to the next item, West Coast Aquatic, Director Steer.
No meeting, no report.
Okay, Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, Dr. Cote.
Okay, thank you. Great convention, AGM. It was well attended. Response was really great coming from the members that attended. I saw lots of our members there, so thank you for that. We did the legislative reform to a full house pretty much. It was free to anybody to attend. It piggybacked on our convention, I guess. It was part of it, but we opened it up to the public, which was really great. Our sponsorship was good, but there was a question on our survey at the end regarding sponsorship, how members feel about allowing sponsors to sponsor us that they didn't feel that they should. So there is a question on that. There was a resolution that came up as well that did not pass, but it had to go to a standing count regarding that issue. So if anybody would like to respond to that, that would be great. I haven't seen the survey yet, but coming back Teresa, our one employee, took a few days off after the convention. She did a great job. And lastly, I was a claim president again for 2023, 2024. So that's it. Thanks.
Congratulations, President. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee.
And we haven't met since I last reported. I think that's coming soon.
Just want to do WEWAG as well.
Okay, that one I can do. So I attended a meeting on April 13th. Western Forest Products did two presentations. The first one was about species at risk and wildlife standards in the forested areas of Vancouver Island. Sarah Germain, an RPF with the biologist for Western Forest Products, talked about goshawks, which are a threatened species on Vancouver Island. They're interesting birds because they fly under the forest canopy, masters at maneuvering through the mature and old growth trees. The birds are about the size of a raven. Sarah also talked about murrelets, bear dens, red-legged frogs, lichen, and how logging practices are altered when a species at risk is found in a potential logging site. The second presentation was done by John Deal, Manager of Forest Stewardship and Wildlife at Western Forest Products. He further discussed species at risk and the mapping techniques that are now in use to identify slopes and heights of forest canopies, which help to identify wildlife habitats. Near the end of the meeting, Dave, I can't pronounce his name, but Poliver from Swakin Advisory Group spoke about their herbicide plan for TFL 44. The targeted areas are small, some about the size of the ACRD meeting room, and there aren't any plans this year for aerial spraying.
Great, thank you. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is the Agricultural Development Committee. Director Boyko. Director Boyko, can you hear me? It's just Ag Dev Committee.
Okay, yeah, I thought we skipped one there. Yeah, we had a meeting yesterday for the Agricultural Development Meeting. Thank you, Chair. The meat processing course went ahead. It was well received. We had 8 people attended it and graduating it. A couple notes. It would be good to have some future courses in the future. They need some more cooler space, and it'd be nice to have it also on nights and weekends so that people that had full-time jobs could attend as well. There was a bit of a feeling that it was only for people that were registered with employment agencies. And I don't think that was true, but just make sure that it's available for all potential participants. There's also 22 boxes of meat available for the community for distribution at the hub, I believe. If the course is held again, there could be some changes to be able to do larger animals at the course, such as a rail system and lockable coolers and a larger bandsaw at the food hub, because they're not really set up for doing large animals such as pigs and beef. One other item was they were looking for a letter of support with regard to the fall fair, and they'll be coming to the board in the future on response to traceability program, not to extend this to the fair with regard to tracking of animals, as it is an overburden of regulations that could be done with the existing people that own the animals, bringing them to the farm or to the fair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Steer. Yeah, you're muted though. Sorry.
I hit the off mute, but I guess it didn't work. Director Boyko, I was just wondering, there was discussion about the potential for running another course. Was that a discussion? I might have missed that. There's been a lot of interest on the West Coast. I know it sounds strange, but I've had several people come up to me and ask me about it. So I don't know if there was a time frame or if in fact another course would be in the near future.
There's nothing scheduled at this time, but there's a lot of interest from other people in the valley as well. Like I said, it would be great to have it on nights and weekends so we could have a lot more different people attending it. And also make sure that people know it's available for everybody. Now, that being said, would it be subsidized the same way, or would people say, hey, you got to cough up $400 for the course, or whatever that number may be? But I know a lot of people that would like to go and take a course like this myself. So there is a lot of interest out there, and now we've done the first run and know some of the potential problems with it that could be remedied. It would be a great thing moving forward. Do it once every 6 months, once a quarter, whatever that number is, and make it potentially a permanent thing moving forward.
Yeah, very much so. I've even had people ask me about it from a Hwait perspective, whether or not we could get something like that in Hwait territory. I think the answer is no, but we'd be able to get people to go to these types of things. So this is a cornerstone of, I think, food security, but also traditional practices, hunting, especially if we're able to deal with larger animals, deer into elk. This is something that could be definitely very prominent. So I'd love to hear more about this in the future as well. So thank you. Last item is any other reports. I would note that we did have the AVICC. Dr. Siga, please go ahead.
Not on the AVICC, but I just wanted to comment that even though the West Coast Aquatic has not met on April 5th, we had a good turnout of directors for the getting together with Tawny and Tim Hawkins of the West Coast Aquatic, who are gathering information towards providing input on developing a coastal marine strategy for all of British Columbia. So that was a very interesting thing. Second is the Classic Biosphere Trust held a joint workshop of 3 different UNESCO biosphere regions on April 3rd and 4th on the West Coast at the former Botanical Gardens. And on the way there, we got to look at the electric developments and heritage sites of Tloquit. And so the workshop was the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region, Classic Biosphere Region, and Howe Sound Biosphere Region. We got together really good information. And also the Alberta Aquatic Health Network. We had another joint meeting, and I don't want to belabor the point, but there will be an island-wide gathering May 30th on Cameron Court and the Brown University. So hopefully we'll address some health issues. Thank you.
Great. Any other reports? Okay, seeing none, we can have someone move to receive. Okay, Dr. Roth, seconded by Dr. Sparrow. Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Great. We don't have any unfinished business. Don't believe we have any late business. Question period other than the volume. Was there any correspondence?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's no questions or comments from the public participating on Zoom or to the email address that we have set up.
I will say, just for the record, though, we will figure out the sound volume levels. I did ask that they adjust them back down to normal because it's giving several of us a headache. So that being said, please go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but on the sound volume levels, as someone that does on Zoom all the time, when someone talks directly to a microphone, it's not bad. When someone turns their head like this and they talk over here, the microphone's over here, especially at the podium, it becomes very difficult to hear them. So when people are moving around, that's part of the problem. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. We did have a conversation about, I think it's, what is it that Joe Rogan says? Like you're a fist length away from the microphone and you're in good shape. And always face it. Not that I endorse much of what he says sometimes, but when it comes to podcasting, he's the man. Okay, so in camera, we'll be going in camera. And normally what we do is we read out the reasons why we'll be going in camera. So I'll do that now. So that brings us to a motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter under sections 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. 2, 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. 3, 91F, law enforcement. The board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. And then finally, 92B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the regional district and the provincial government or the federal government or both, or between the provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. And so moved. Can we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Director Cote. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.